day to viewers, the Colonel speaking to you live from the Grange for British Imperial YouTube Broadcasting. Today we've got some of the EMI British Drama League records of American speech. This is JG 494, Middle Western, the Gettysburg Address, recalled by an eyewitness, spoken by Arthur Klein. Here we go.
I remember my grandfather telling me about listening to Abraham Lincoln delivering the Gettysburg Address. My grandfather was only a young man in his 20s from the Middle West at the time, but he was in a regiment of troops stationed nearby and happened to attend the ceremony. I think it impressed him more than anything that ever happened in his whole life. It was on November 19th, 1863, on the same battlefield where only a few months before one of the bloodiest battles of modern warfare up till that time had been fought. My grandfather said there was a big parade before the ceremony began, and at 10 o'clock that morning he saw Lincoln come out of the residence where he was staying. He was wearing a black suit, a high silk hat, and white gloves, and he mounted a horse, a beautiful chestnut horse, and his towering figure made everyone else look small. He said the president sat very erect and looked terribly majestic as the parade began. And then he got to thinking about something, because suddenly his body leaned forward, his arms hung limp, and his head was bent far down. The orator of the day was Edward Everett, one of the most distinguished of American classical orators, who had been a senator, a governor, secretary of state, a minister to Great Britain, and even president of Harvard College. He spoke for 2 hours, and the audience cheered for a long time. And then it was Lincoln's turn. My grandfather said that he rose from his chair, took out 2 sheets of paper from his coat pocket, put on his tiny spectacles, looked at the manuscript, and then put it back in his pocket. The crowd was silent and stretched to limits that would surely test any man's voice. Around him were wheat fields and meadows and peach orchards, and in the distance the blue ridges of the Cumberland Mountains. And my grandfather copied down the slow-spoken words as the president began to speak. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Well, there we are, viewers. Hopefully you'll recognise that as some form of American. I can't say I do, but there we go. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and goodbye.